Go beg on the streets, you beggar! My son's words sliced through the air, sharp as broken glass, just as I reached for the chair at the end of the table. The room fell silent. Forks hovered mid-air, eyes darted away, and the only sound was the clatter of my own heart pounding in my chest. I stood there, one hand on the back of the chair, the other trembling at my side, as if the world had tilted and left me standing on the edge. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just looked at him, my own flesh and blood, the boy I had raised, the man I thought I knew. His face was red, his jaw clenched, his eyes cold. Around the table, my daughter-in-law smirked, my grandchildren stared at their plates, and my husband, silent as always, stared at the wall. Before I go on, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Have you ever been humiliated by your own family, in your own home? Share your story or your city below. And don't go anywhere, because what happened after that dinner changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what it means to be a mother. The smell of roast chicken and potatoes filled the room, but I couldn't taste a thing. I had spent the whole day cooking, cleaning, making sure everything was perfect. I wanted tonight to be special, a rare family dinner, everyone together under one roof. I had even set the table with the good china, the set my mother gave me when I got married, but none of that mattered now. I let go of the chair and stood tall, refusing to let my son see me break. If that's how you feel, I won't stay where I'm not wanted, I said, my voice steady, even as my hands shook. No one stopped me as I walked out of the dining room. No one called my name. I heard my daughter-in-law's laughter, low and mean, as I closed the door behind me. I walked down the hallway, past the photos of birthdays and holidays, past the memories of a fam I thought I had built with love and sacrifice. In the quiet of my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap. I stared at the faded quilt, the one I had sewn by hand when my son was born. I remembered the nights I stayed up rocking him to sleep, the days I worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, the years I spent putting everyone else first. I thought about all the times I had forgiven him, when he crashed the car, when he dropped out of college, when he borrowed money and never paid it back. I thought about the gifts, the loans, the endless second chances. I thought about the way he used to hug me, the way he used to say, "I love you, Mom," before the world taught him to be hard. I realized, with a kind of cold clarity, that I had become invisible in my own home. I was no longer a mother, a wife, a woman with dreams and dignity. I was just a burden, a beggar, someone to be tolerated or ignored. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the quiet street, listening to the laughter and clinking glasses drifting down the hallway. I thought about leaving, packing a bag, walking out the door, starting over somewhere new. But where would I go? What would I do? I was 71 years old, with nothing but memories and a bank account that had been drained by years of giving. As the hours passed, my anger grew. Not just at my son, but at myself, for letting it get this far, for believing that love meant sacrifice, for thinking that if I just gave enough, I would always belong. By morning, I had made a decision. I would not beg for a place at a table I had built with my own hands. I would not let my son's words define me. I would not disappear. I started by making a list, every loan, every gift, every sacrifice I had made for my family. I wrote down the dates, the amounts, the reasons. I totaled it all. The numbers started to ring back at me like a verdict. I realized I had given away more than money. I had given away pieces of myself, one small act at a time. I called my lawyer, Mr. Harris, the man who had helped me write my will years ago. I told him everything, about the dinner, the insults, the years of financial support. He listened quietly, then said, "You have rights, Mrs. Evans. You don't have to let them treat you this way." His words were a lifeline. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. That afternoon, I packed a small bag, took my notebook, and left the house. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out the door, head held high, and didn't look back. As I stepped into the sunlight, I realized that sometimes, the hardest thing isn't being left out, it's choosing to walk away. But I had no idea just how far my son and his wife would go to keep me from reclaiming my life. And that was just the beginning. I walked through the city with my small bag, the morning air sharp against my cheeks. I didn't have a plan, just a destination. the little cafe on Maple Street where I used to meet my friend Ruth for coffee before she moved away. I needed a place to sit, to think, to breathe without feeling like a ghost in my own home. The cafe was nearly empty, the smell of fresh bread and coffee wrapping around me like a blanket. I ordered tea and sat by the window, my notebook open in front of me. I stared at the list I'd started the night before. Every loan, every gift, every time I'd bailed my son out of trouble. The numbers added up to more than I'd ever admitted to myself. Rent, car repairs, credit card bills, down payments, birthday gifts, groceries, even the money I'd sent when he said he was just a little short for the month. I wrote it all down, line by line, the pen digging into the paper. I remembered the excuses, the promises to pay me back, the way he'd hug me and say, "You're the best, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." I remembered the first time he called me selfish, for hesitating. The first time he said, "You owe me. After all, you're my mother." I realized with a kind of cold clarity that I had been paying for love that was never really mine. I sipped my tea, watching the world go by outside the window. People hurried past, bundled against the cold, their faces set with purpose. I wondered if any of them had ever felt as invisible as I did now. My phone buzzed. A message from my son. "Where are you? Are you coming back for dinner tonight? Carrie says you're being dramatic. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. I didn't reply. I didn't owe him an explanation, not anymore. Instead, I called Mr. Harris. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and steady. "Mrs. Evans, I was just thinking about you. Are you all right?" I told him about the dinner, about the words my son had thrown at me, about the years of financial support, about the list I'd made. He listened quietly, then said, "You've done more than enough. It's time to protect yourself." He asked me to bring the notebook and any documents I had. "We'll review everything. You have rights, Linda. You don't have to let them take advantage of you." I finished my tea, paid the bill, and walked to Mr. Harris's office. The city felt different now, less like a place I belonged, more like a place I was passing through. I wondered if I would ever feel at home again. At the office, Mr. Harris greeted me with a kind smile. We sat together at his desk, spreading out the notebook, the bank statements, the receipts I'd saved out of habit. He went through each line, his brow furrowing as the total grew. "This is a pattern of financial exploitation," he said quietly. "You've been supporting them for years, and now they're trying to shame you for stopping. We can take legal steps to protect your assets, to make sure they can't access your accounts without your permission." I nodded, relief and fear warring inside me. "What about my home? What if they try to force me out?" He shook his head. "You're the owner. They have no legal right to evict you. If they try, call me immediately." I left the office with a folder of documents and a plan. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a shield. That afternoon, I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. The room was plain but clean, the bedspread faded but soft. I sat on the bed, the folder in my lap, and let myself cry, not for my son, not for the family I'd lost, but for the woman I had been, the woman who thought love meant giving until there was nothing left. I wrote in my journal, "Today I chose myself. Today I stopped begging for a place at a table I built. Today I started to fight back." The next morning, I woke to a string of messages from my son and Carrie. "Mom, you're overreacting. Come home, let's talk. We need you to help with the bills. If you don't come back, you'll regret it." I didn't reply. I packed my things, checked out of the motel, and went to the bank. With Mr. Harris's help, I froze the joint accounts, opened a new one in my name only, and changed every password I could remember. I felt a strange sense of freedom, like I was finally stepping out of a cage I hadn't known I was in. That afternoon, I went back to the house. I stood on the porch, my key in my hand, and took a deep breath. I was ready for whatever came next. Inside, the house was quiet. My son and Carrie were in the kitchen, their voices low and tense. When they saw me, Carrie's eyes narrowed. "Decided to come back, have you?" I looked at her, then at my son. "I came to get my things, and to tell you both that the bank is closed. No more money, no more guilt. No more begging." My son's face twisted in anger. "You can't do this to us. We're your family." I shook my head. "Family doesn't treat each other like this. I'm done." I turned and walked out, the door closing softly behind me. As I stepped into the sunlight, I realized that sometimes, the bravest thing you see and do is walk away. But I had no idea just how far they would go to try to pull me back in. I walked away from the house with my head high, but my heart was pounding. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay where I wasn't wanted, where every meal, every conversation, every moment was a negotiation for scraps of respect. I drove to the city park, parked under a maple tree, and sat in the car, watching the world go by. The phone buzzed again. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. You can't just cut us off. We have bills to pay. Olivia needs new shoes. If you don't help, we'll have to move out. Is that what you want?" I stared at the messages, my hands shaking. For years those words would have sent me running to the bank, desperate to fix everything, to keep the peace. But now I saw them for what they were, manipulation, not love. I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet, letting the anger and sadness wash over me. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no, all the times I'd put their needs above my own, all the times I'd convinced myself that being a good mother meant being a silent one. I remembered the first time Benjamin called me selfish. It was years ago, after I'd said I couldn't help with another down payment. He'd shouted, "You only care about yourself," and slammed the phone down. I'd cried for hours, convinced I was a failure, but now, I realized that loving someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. I drove to Florence's house, my hands still trembling. She opened the door with a warm smile, ushered me inside, and poured me a cup of tea. I told her everything, about the dinner, the insults, the years of financial support, the decision to walk away. She listened, her eyes kind. "You did the right thing, Linda. It's hard, but sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go." We sat in her kitchen, the aft, our noon sun slanting through the window, and talked about everything, our children, our regrets, our hopes for the future. I realized, for the first time, that I wasn't alone, that there were other women like me, women who had given everything and gotten nothing in return. That night, I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. The room was plain but clean, the bedspread faded but soft. I sat on the bed, the folder from Mr. Harris in my lap, and let myself cry, not for my son, not for the family I'd lost, but for the woman I had been. The woman who thought love meant giving until there was nothing left. I wrote in my journal, "Today, I chose myself. Today, I stopped begging for a place at a table I built. Today, I started to fight back." The next morning, I woke to a string of messages from my son and Carrie. "Mom, you're overreacting. Come home. Let's talk. We need you to help with the bills. If you don't come back, you'll regret it." I didn't reply. I packed my things, checked out of the motel, and went to the bank. With Mr. Harris's help, I froze the joint accounts, opened a new one in my name only, and changed every password I could remember. I felt a strange sense of freedom, like I was finally stepping out of a cage I hadn't known I was in. That afternoon, I went back to the house. I stood on the porch, my key in my hand, and took a deep breath. I was ready for whatever came next. Inside, the house was quiet. My son and Carrie were in the kitchen, their voices low and tense. When they saw me, Carrie's eyes narrowed. "Decided to come back, have you?" I looked at her, then at my son. "I came to get my things, and to tell you both that the bank is closed. No more money, no more guilt, no more begging." My son's face twisted in anger. "You can't do this to us. We're your family." I shook my head. "Family doesn't treat each other like this. I'm done." I turned and walked out, the door closing softly behind me. As I stepped into the sunlight, I realized that sometimes, the braves' thing you can do is walk away. But I had no idea just how far they would go to try to pull me back in. That night I stayed at Florence's house. We sat on her porch, sipping tea, watching the stars appear one by one. She told me about her own battles, about the years she spent fighting for her dignity, about the moment she realized she was worth more than the money she gave. "You're not alone, Linda," she said. "You never were." I smiled, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could build a new life, one where I was seen, respected, and loved for who I was, not for what I could give. But as I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed again. "You'll regret this, Mom. We're not done." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid, because I had finally learned to say no. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping against Florence's kitchen window. She was already up, humming softly as she made coffee. I joined her at the table, grateful for the warmth and the company. For a moment, it almost felt like normal life, two friends sharing a quiet morning, the world outside held at bay. But my phone buzzed again, shattering the peace. "You're making a mistake, Mom. If you don't help us, we'll have to take legal action. Don't blame us for what happens next." I showed Florence the message. She read it, her lips pressed into a thin line. "They're trying to scare you," she said. "Don't let them." I nodded, but the fear was real. I knew Benjamin and Carrie were desperate, but I hadn't expected them to threaten me with court. I thought about all the years I'd spent helping them, all the times I'd bailed them out, all the sacrifices I'd made. Now, they were turning on me, ready to drag me through the mud to get what they wanted. I called Mr. Harris, my lawyer, and told him about the message. He listened, read carefully, then said, "This is classic financial abuse, Linda. They're trying to intimidate you into giving in, but you have rights. If they file anything, we'll be ready." I realized, for the first time, that I wasn't alone, that there were other women like me, women who had given everything and gotten nothing in return. That night, I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. The room was plain but clean, the bedspread faded but soft. I sat on the bed, the folder from Mr. Harris in my lap, and let myself cry, not for my son, not for the family I'd lost, but for the woman I had been. The woman who thought love meant giving until there was nothing left. I wrote in my journal, "Today, I chose myself. Today, I stopped begging for a place at a table I built. Today, I started to fight back." The next morning, I woke to a string of messages from my son and Carrie. "Mom, you're overreacting. Come home. Let's talk. We need you to help with the bills. If you don't come back, you'll regret it." I didn't reply. I packed my things, checked out of the motel, and went to the bank. With Mr. Harris's help, I froze the joint accounts, opened a new one in my name only, and changed every password I could remember. I felt a strange sense of freedom, like I was finally stepping out of a cage I hadn't known I was in. That afternoon, I went back to the house. I stood on the porch, my key in my hand, and took a deep breath. I was ready for whatever came next. Inside, the house was quiet. My son and Carrie were in the kitchen, their voices low and tense. When they saw me, Carrie's eyes narrowed. "Decided to come back, have you?" I looked at her, then at my son. "I came to get my things, and to tell you both that the bank is closed. No more money, no more guilt, no more begging." My son's face twisted in anger. "You can't do this to us. We're your family." I shook my head. "Family doesn't treat each other like this. I'm done." I turned and walked out, the door closing softly behind me. As I stepped into the sunlight, I realized that sometimes, the braves, thing you can do is walk away. But I had no idea just how far they would go to try to pull me back in. That night I stayed at Florence's house. We sat on her porch, sipping tea, watching the stars appear one by one. She told me about her own battles, about the years she spent fighting for her dignity, about the moment she realized she was worth more than the money she gave. "You're not alone, Linda," she said. "You never were." I smiled, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could build a new life, one where I was seen, respected, and loved for who I was, not for what I could give. But as I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed again. "You'll regret this, Mom. We're not done." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid, because I had finally learned to say no. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping against Florence's kitchen window. She was already up, humming softly as she made coffee. I joined her at the table, grateful for the warmth and the company. For a moment, it almost felt like normal life, two friends sharing a quiet morning, the world outside held at bay. But my phone buzzed again, shattering the peace. "You're making a mistake, Mom. If you don't help us, we'll have to take legal action. Don't blame us for what happens next." I showed Florence the message. She read it, her lips pressed into a thin line. "They're trying to scare you," she said. "Don't let them." I nodded, but the fear was real. I knew Benjamin and Carrie were desperate, but I hadn't expected them to threaten me with court. I thought about all the years I'd spent helping them, all the times I'd bailed them out, all the sacrifices I'd made. Now, they were turning on me, ready to drag me through the mud to get what they wanted. I called Mr. Harris, my lawyer, and told him about the message. He listened, read carefully, then said, This is classic financial abuse, Linda. They're trying to intimidate you into giving in, but you have rights. If they file anything, we'll be ready. That afternoon, I went back to my house to gather the rest of my things. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy with clouds. I moved quietly through the rooms, packing clothes, books, and a few keepsakes into boxes. I paused in the living room, running my fingers over the old family photos on the mantel. I took down the one of Benjamin as a boy, his smile bright and innocent, and slipped it into my bag. As I was leaving, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Benjamin and Carrie got out, their faces set and determined. I braced myself as they approached. "Mom, we need to talk," Benjamin said, his voice cold. I stood my ground. "There's nothing left to say." Carrie stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "You're being unreasonable. We're your family. You owe us." I shook my head. "I don't owe you anything. Not anymore." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "If you don't help us, we'll go to court. We'll tell everyone you're unstable, that you can't take care of yourself. We'll get power of attorney and take control of everything." I felt a surge of anger, stronger than the fear. "Go ahead," I said. "Try. But I have records, witnesses, and a lawyer who knows exactly what you're doing. I'm not afraid of you." Carrie scoffed. "You'll regret this, Linda. You're going to end up alone." I looked at her, then at my son. "I'd rather be alone than used." They turned and walked away, slamming the car doors behind them. I watched them go, my heart pounding, but my resolve unshaken. That night, I stayed at Florence's again. We talked late into the evening, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. She told me about the time her own son tried to take her house, about the court battle she fought and won. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "Don't let them break you." I wrote in my journal, "Today I stood my ground. Today I refused to be bullied. Today I chose myself again." The next day, a letter arrived from Benjamin and Carrie's lawyer. It was full of legal jargon, threats of guardianship, accusations of mental instability. I took it straight to Mr. Harris, who read it and shook his head. "They're bluffing. We'll respond with evidence, your medical records, your financial statements, the texts and emails. They have no case." We spent the next week gathering everything: doctor's notes, bank statements, letters from friends and neighbors. Florence wrote a statement describing the times she'd seen Benjamin and Carrie yelling at me, the way they'd treated me like a burden instead of a mother. The stress was overwhelming, but I refused to give in. I went to church, prayed for strength, and leaned on the support group Florence had introduced me to. I listened to other women's stories, stories of children who had turned on them, of families torn apart by greed and entitlement. I realized I wasn't alone. I was part of a community of survivors, women who had learned to fight for their dignity, their independence, their right to be seen. The day of the first court hearing arrived. I dressed carefully, choosing a blue dress that made me feel strong. Florence came with me, her presence a steady comfort. Mr. Harris met us at the courthouse, his briefcase full of evidence. Inside, Benjamin and Carrie sat with their lawyer, their faces hard and unyielding. The judge listened to both sides, asking questions, reviewing the documents. Mr. Harris presented the evidence, my medical records, the bank statements, the threatening messages. He called Florence as a witness, and she spoke clearly and calmly about what she had seen. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "I am not unstable. I am not a burden. I am a mother who has given everything for her family, and I refuse to be erased." The judge nodded, her eyes kind. "Thank you. And Mrs. Evans, we'll review the evidence and make a decision." As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had told the truth. I had stood up for myself. Whatever happened next, I knew I had done everything I could. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I faced my fears. Today, I spoke my truth. Today, I remembered who I am." And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The days leading up to the next hearing were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and restless nights. Florence checked in every day, bringing fresh bread or a bouquet from her garden. Mr. Harris called with updates, his calm voice a steady anchor in the storm. "They're pushing hard, Linda," he said, "but we're ready. You have the truth on your side." I tried to keep busy, but the anxiety gnawed at me. I replayed every conversation with Benjamin and Carrie, every moment of kindness that had been twisted into obligation. I wondered if they ever thought about the years I spent caring for them, the sacrifices I made, the love I gave so freely. Or had I become nothing more than a line item on their budget, a resource to be tapped until it ran dry? The morning of the hearing, I dressed with care. I chose a simple gray suit, pinned my hair back, and put on the pearl earrings Thomas had given me on our 30th anniversary. I looked in the mirror and saw not a victim, but a woman who had survived storms before. Florence drove me to the courthouse. The sky was overcast, the air heavy with the promise of rain. We walked in together, heads held high. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Benjamin and Carrie sat with their lawyer, their faces tight and pale. I saw Benjamin glance at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't name, anger, maybe, or regret. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Mr. Harris presented our case with quiet confidence. He laid out the evidence, bank statements, medical reports, the threatening messages, Florence's testimony. He spoke about the pattern of financial exploitation, about the years I had spent supporting my family, about the right of every person to control their own life. Benjamin's lawyer tried to paint me as confused, unstable, unable to manage my affairs. He called a doctor who had never met me, who read from a report full of vague phrases and second-hand observations. But when Dr. Moore took the stand, she spoke clearly and firmly. Mrs. Evans is fully competent. She manages her finances, her home, and her health with clarity and independence. Florence testified next, her voice steady. She described the arguments she'd witnessed, the way Benjamin and Carrie had treated me, the fear she'd seen in my eyes. Linda is not confused, she said. She's been taken advantage of by the people she loves most. When it was my turn, I stood, my hands trembling, but my voice strong. I spoke about the years of sacrifice, the love I had given, the pain of being turned into a bank instead of a mother. I spoke about the night Benjamin called me a beggar, about the decision to walk away, about the freedom I had found in saying no. I am not a burden, I said. I am not unstable. I am a mother who has given everything for her family, and I refuse to be erased. The judge listened, her eyes kind. When I finished, she nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Evans. Your courage is noted. The hearing ended, and we waited in the hallway for the judge's decision. Florence squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. You did it, Linda. No matter what happens, you stood up for yourself. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace. I had told the truth. I had fought for my dignity. Whatever the outcome, I knew I had done everything I could. The judge's decision came later that afternoon. Mr. Harris called me, his voice triumphant. The court denied their petition for guardianship. The judge found no evidence of incapacity or financial mismanagement. You retain full control of your assets, your home, and your life. Relief flooded through me, so strong I had to sit down. I thanked Mr. Harris, tears streaming down my face. Florence hugged me tight, her laughter ringing through the house. You did it, Linda. You won, but the victory was bittersweet. Benjamin and Carrie didn't call. They didn't apologize. They simply disappeared, leaving a silence that was both a wound and a blessing. That night, I sat on the porch, watching the rain fall, the garden glistening in the lamplight. I wrote in my journal, "Today, I reclaimed my life. Today, I proved that love is not a debt to be repaid, but a gift to be cherished. Today, I remembered who I am, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. But I knew the journey wasn't over. Healing would take time. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would be a long road. But I was ready to walk it one step at a time. The days after the judge's decision were strangely quiet. I expected to feel triumphant, but instead, I felt a kind of emptiness, a silence that settled over the house like dust. I had won my freedom, my dignity, my right to live on my own terms. But I had lost something too. The phone didn't ring. There were no more messages, no more demands, no more accusations. Benjamin and Carrie had vanished from my life, taking Olivia with them. Florence visited often, bringing fresh bread, flowers, and stories from the support group. We sat on the porch, sipping tea, watching the world go by. She understood the ache that lingered beneath my relief. You did what you had to do, Linda, she said, but it's okay to grieve what you lost. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I miss them, Florence. Even after everything, I miss my son. I miss my granddaughter. She squeezed my hand. That's the price of choosing yourself. Sometimes you have to let go of people who refuse to see your worth. I tried to fill the days with small joys, gardening, painting, baking. I joined Florence at the support group, sharing my story with other women who had walked the same hard road. We laughed, we cried, we celebrated every small victory. I realized that I wasn't alone. There were so many of us, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, who had been used, dismissed, and finally, who had chosen to stand up for themselves. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words inside were unmistakably Benjamin's. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I'm angry, I'm hurt, but I also know I went too far. I miss you. Olivia asks about you every day. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Benjamin. I read the letter over and over, my heart aching. I wanted to call him, to tell him I forgave him, to beg him to bring Olivia to visit, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. The wounds were still too fresh, the trust too broken. Instead, I wrote him a letter of my own. Benjamin, I love you. I always have, and I always will. But love is not a blank check. I hope one day you'll understand why I had to say no. I hope you'll find your own strength, your own way. Mom, I didn't send it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But writing it helped. It was a step toward healing, a way to let go of the anger without letting go of myself. The support group became my lifeline. I listened to other women's stories, stories of betrayal, of loss, of hard-won freedom. I realized that my pain was not unique, that my journey was part of a larger tapestry of resilience. We celebrated each other's victories, no matter how small, a new job, a reconciled relationship, a day without tears. Florence and I started a project together, organizing workshops for women in the community. We taught them how to keep records, how to spot financial abuse, how to protect themselves. We wrote letters to local officials, advocating for stronger as the weeks passed, the house felt less empty. I filled it with flowers, with music, with laughter. I painted the walls a soft blue, planted roses in the garden, and bought a new set of dishes, just for me. I realized that freedom wasn't just about saying no to others, it was about saying yes to myself. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sun set, Florence joined me. She handed me a cup of tea and smiled. You're not alone, Linda. You never were. I smiled back, feeling a warmth I hadn't known in years. Thank you, Florence, for everything. She squeezed my hand. We're stronger together. That night I wrote in my journal. Today I chose myself again. Today I found peace in the quiet. Today, I remembered that love is not about sacrifice, it's about respect. As I closed the journal, I realized that the cost of freedom was high, but the price of losing myself would have been higher. And for the first time in a long time, I was grateful for the silence. Summer arrived, and with it, a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. The garden bloomed in wild colors, bees buzzing among the roses and daisies I'd planted with Florence. The house, once a place of tension and fear, was now filled with light and the gentle hum of peace. I woke each morning with a sense of purpose, no longer waiting for the phone to ring or for someone to need me. Florence and I poured our energy into the support group. Word spread, and soon women from all over town and even neighboring towns came to our meetings. Some were mothers like me, others were grandmothers. A few were men who had been cut off by their own children. We shared stories, offered advice, and celebrated every small victory. We called ourselves the Unforgotten, a name that made us all stand a little taller. One afternoon, after a particularly moving meeting, a woman named Ruth approached me. She was in her late 60s, her hands rough from years of work, her eyes bright with hope. "Linda, you saved my life," she said, her voice trembling. "I was ready to give up, but your story gave me the courage to fight back." I hugged her, tears stinging my eyes. "You saved yourself, Ruth. I just reminded you that you could." The group became more than just a support system. It became a family. We organized potlucks, garden parties, and even a small art show featuring paintings and crafts made by our members. The laughter and warmth that filled those gatherings healed something deep inside me. Something I hadn't even realized was broken. I started painting again, filling canvases with the colors of hope and resilience. I hung my work in the living room, a daily reminder that I was still creating, still growing, still alive. Florence encouraged me to submit a piece to the county fair, and to my surprise, I won a ribbon for Best in Show. The recognition was sweet, but the real prize was the sense of pride I felt in myself. David called more often, his voice softer, more thoughtful. He apologized less and listened more. Sometimes he brought Olivia to visit, and those afternoons were bittersweet, full of laughter and stories, but also the ache of knowing how much time we'd lost. I cherished every moment, determined not to let the past steal any more of my future. Vanessa never called, but I heard through the grapevine that she was working at a new job, trying to rebuild her life. I wished her well, hoping that one day she would find peace too. One evening, as the sun set over the garden, Florence and I sat on the porch, sipping iced tea and watching the fireflies dance. She turned to me, her eyes shining. "You know, Linda, you've built something beautiful here. Not just a home, but a legacy." I smiled, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my heart. I just wanted to prove that I mattered, that I wasn't invisible. She squeezed my hand. "You did more than that. You showed all of us that it's never too late to start over." That night, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I found family in unexpected places. Today, I learned that love isn't about blood or obligation. It's about kindness, respect, deceit, and the courage to keep going." As I closed the journal, I realized that the family I'd lost had made room for a new kind of family, one built on truth, on strength, on the refusal to disappear. And for the first time in a long time, I looked forward to tomorrow. Autumn returned, painting the trees in gold and crimson. The air was crisp, the sky impossibly blue, and the world felt new. I spent my mornings in the garden, my afternoons painting, and my evenings surrounded by friends from the unforgotten. The house was no longer a place of waiting or regret. It was a home, filled with laughter, music, and the quiet joy of belonging to myself. Florence and I continued to lead the support group, now a lifeline for dozens of women and men who had once felt as invisible as I had. We organized workshops, wrote letters to lawmakers, and even started a small fund to help those in crisis. Our voices, once silenced by fear and shame, now rang out with strength and purpose. One afternoon, as I was preparing tea for the group, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Benjamin standing on the porch, Olivia by his side. He looked older, thinner, his eyes shadowed with regret. Olivia clung to his hand, her gaze uncertain. "Hi, Mom," Benjamin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we come in?" I hesitated, my heart pounding, but then I stepped aside, letting them into the warmth of the house. Olivia ran to the living room, her laughter filling the air as she discovered the new paintings on the walls. Benjamin stood in the kitchen, his hands shaking. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. I was angry, scared, and I took it out on you. I let Carrie convince me that you were the problem, when really, I was just afraid of losing control." I listened, my heart aching. "I know, Benjamin. I know it wasn't all you. But you have to understand, I couldn't keep giving until there was nothing left of me." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I understand now. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to try. I want Olivia to know her grandmother. I want to be a better son." I hugged him, the yen. Hours of pain and anger melting away in that moment. "We can start again," I whispered. "But this time it has to be different. This time, I have to matter too." He nodded, and for the first time in years I saw the boy I had raised, the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and wild stories, the boy who had gotten lost but found his way back. Olivia ran into the kitchen, her arms full of drawings. "Grandma, look, I made these for you." I knelt beside her, tears streaming down my face. "They're beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." That evening, we sat around the dinner table, me, Benjamin, Olivia, and Florence, sharing stories, laughter, and the simple comfort of being together. The wounds were still there, but they were healing, replaced by hope and the quiet certainty that we had survived. After they left, I sat on the porch, the stars bright above the dark trees. I thought about the journey I had taken, the pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice. I realized that survival isn't just about winning in court. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, your place in the world. It's about refusing to disappear, no matter how hard others try to erase you. I wrote in my journal, "Today, I learned that saying enough is not the end, it's the beginning." The beginning of a life lived on my own terms, surrounded by people who see me, respect me, and love me for who I am. And now, I want to ask you, the one listening to my story. What would you do if your own family tried to erase you? Would you keep giving, or would you finally say enough? I want to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments. If my story moved you, please like this video. It helps more people find hope when they need it most. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories of survival, courage, and the power of choosing yourself. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Why? You might just give them the strength to refuse to disappear. With all my heart, thank you for listening. Until next time.